E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The powerful story of friendship. A friendship that binds two lost souls from two different worlds. Released in 1982 and often considered Steven Spielberg's masterpiece, E.T. tells the story of a young boy called Elliot, played by Henry Thomas, a boy living in a broken home who can't quite relate to those he is around. However, one night he discovers a mysterious alien being. Elliot and the alien, who he names E.T., develops a friendship, as Elliot discovers that E.T. was accidentally left on Earth while visiting with his family, as the two must work together to help E.T. phone home, while also avoiding scientists who are trying to track E.T. down in this fun adventure that will live on forever throughout the ages. So today we are looking into 10 things that you didn't know about E.T., the movie that made me cry my eyes out as a kid. Oh yeah, this movie left me absolutely blubbering. But hey, come on, I was just a kid, so let's start the magic and check it out. Number 10, E.T. started as a dramatic story about divorce. The genesis of E.T. starts in 1977 with the release of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. After directing the hit science fiction UFO movie, Spielberg got to work on a movie called Growing Up, which was to be a reflection on Spielberg's own experience in growing up during the time of his parents' divorce, and the alienation that came from that. Only it was to be told through the perspective of three siblings. So with that, already some of the story elements of E.T. were put into place. However, Spielberg abandoned Growing Up to make his World War II comedy 1941 instead. However, also at this time, Columbia Pictures were pressing Spielberg to make a sequel to Close Encounters, which would lead to another development in the creation of E.T. Number 9. Then E.T. was going to be a horror movie. So Columbia Pictures were anticipating Spielberg to make a Close Encounters sequel. Spielberg was in a tricky position as he didn't want to make a Close Encounters sequel, but also didn't want someone else to either, where he got the idea of what would happen if one of the aliens seen at the end of Close Encounters got left behind. So he turned his attentions to making a sort of spin-off, sort of sequel, but really its own thing, called Night Skies. Spielberg approached independent filmmaker John Sayles to write a script for Night Skies, which was primarily a horror movie about sinister aliens invading a family home. And as Night Skies production went on, even some early alien designs and model designs were created by makeup artist genius Rick Baker, where you can see the formation of the aliens from E.T. in the works, be that more sinister versions. However, while filming Raiders of the Lost Ark in Africa, Spielberg came to the realization that Night Skies was just too dark. He wanted to make something more spiritual, much closer to the original Close Encounters. However, Spielberg didn't entirely abandon the Night Skies project. Number 8. Then there were two movies. Spielberg wanted Night Skies to be more of a personal movie, to have elements of his growing up script, to explore childhood alienation and loneliness. It was on the set of Raiders of the Lost Ark that Spielberg approached Melissa Matheson, who was on the set visiting her boyfriend slash future husband Harrison Ford, who of course was playing Indiana Jones, where Spielberg told her of his ideas and asked her to write a script, to which thankfully she did set out to write the script, with Spielberg frequently adding input here and there, like the chase sequence and E.T. getting drunk, and within 8 weeks she wrote the E.T. script. However, the more sinister script of Night Skies evolved into the movie Poltergeist, only the terror in question was turned into ghosts instead of aliens. In fact, both E.T. and Poltergeist have similar themes of childhood alienation and the breakdown of the modern family. In a way, Poltergeist is E.T.'s evil twin. And the two movies were in production at the same time, and Spielberg originally intended to direct both movies. However, Columbia Pictures weren't too happy with the more heartfelt approach to E.T. Number 7. Columbia Pictures out, Universal Pictures in. Columbia Pictures felt the E.T. script was far too aimed at small children and wasn't scary enough, and they felt the movie just wouldn't sell at the box office. Yeah, E.T., one of the biggest movies of all time. Spielberg still pitched the script to a few Columbia Pictures executives, but there wasn't much interest. He then took his project to Universal Pictures, who previously distributed Spielberg's mega hit Jaws. So Universal Pictures brought the script off Columbia for $1 million. However, Universal supposedly told Spielberg that while directing E.T., he wasn't to direct any other movies at the same time, especially considering that he was working on the production of Poltergeist for MGM. So Tobe Hooper was hired to direct Poltergeist, with Spielberg acting as a producer for that movie. Although over the years there have been rumors by fans and people who worked on Poltergeist that Spielberg did secretly direct the movie, or at least was more hands-on than your usual producer. Wow, I just can't believe that Columbia Pictures turned down E.T. Several years later, they turned down Back to the Future as well. The lesson is, if you're a movie production company and a Spielberg-related production comes your way, then you totally take that project. Number 6. Bringing E.T. to life. The two most important parts of E.T. is that of Elliot and, of course, E.T. Spielberg auditioned hundreds of young boys for the role but wasn't satisfied. Henry Thomas was suggested to him, as the previous year the young boy starred in the movie Raggedy Man. Henry Thomas was instantly cast during his audition, of which his performance in his audition is very powerful, and it's amazing how such a young kid can suddenly generate those emotions. As for the parts of E.T., everyone's favourite lovable lost alien, the design of E.T. was supposedly modelled after Albert Einstein, Carl Sandburg, and a pug. E.T. was performed in costume by various people, including a boy with no legs called Matthew Demerit, two little people called Tamara DeForo and Pat Billen, and thanks to their efforts, one of the most iconic movie characters was brought to life. E.T. was voiced by actress Pat Welch, and in order to create that E.T. voice, she smoked 2 packets of cigarettes a day. Oh, yikes! When not performed by a person, the character of E.T. was brought to life by a puppet, in which the puppetry work for E.T. was pretty groundbreaking for its time. Number 5. Deleted ideas. There were some ideas and creative choices associated with E.T. that were scrapped along the way. Originally, Spielberg envisioned Elliot to be a boy with autism. Now, you can't rule out that Elliot doesn't have some form of autism, but it's never mentioned in the movie. The original title of E.T. was A Boy's Life, although this title was apparently used as a distraction to avoid people snooping in on the E.T. project. With the exception of Elliot's mum, played by Dee Wallace, most of the camera angles seen at the start of the movie are on par with the child character's eye level, with most of the adult characters' faces not being seen. There was a deleted scene where Elliot is in his high school principal's office, where the principal discusses Elliot's behaviour. The principal was played by none other than Harrison Ford, who previously worked with Spielberg on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there are even photos floating out there of Harrison Ford on the set of E.T. There was also a deleted character who was to be Elliot's best friend, and a young Corey Feldman was cast in the role. However, after the character was deleted, Spielberg promised to cast Feldman in another movie instead, which led to his casting in Gremlins. I'm glad the best friend aspect was cut, as Elliot is supposed to be a lonely boy who can't relate to those that he is around. Having a best friend would have kind of diminished that. And Drew Barrymore, who played Gertie, originally auditioned for the role of Carol Ann in Poltergeist, but Spielberg felt her humour was much more suited to Gertie. There are even several pictures out there of Spielberg hanging out with the child actors from both E.T. and Poltergeist. And on a similar note, Peter Coyote, who plays the scientist Keyes, originally auditioned for Indiana Jones, but he was cast in E.T. instead. I have also seen online claims that E.T.'s real name is Zrek, spelled Z-R-E-C-K. But take that with a pinch of salt, as I couldn't find anything official to confirm that. It might be true, it might not, I'm just not very sure. Number 4. The music of E.T. E.T.'s mesmerising and powerful score was composed by John Williams, who of course scores most of Spielberg's movies. Having just provided the score for Raiders of the Lost Ark, Williams took a different approach to E.T. He didn't go for an adventurous sound like he did with Indiana Jones, but instead for a more emotional one, which both captivates sadness, mystery, and the innocence of youth. Williams explains that it was a challenge creating a score to generate sympathy for such an odd-looking creature. But that he did. And of course then there was the E.T. audiobook album, of which Spielberg hired Michael Jackson to narrate, bringing two of the biggest parts of the 80s together, in which Jackson narrates the story of E.T. and even provides a song for the album called Someone in the Dark, which I think has gone on to become a forgotten track. The album was fairly successful upon its release and even won a Grammy in 1984. And interestingly enough, the E.T. audiobook album was released just 2 weeks before Thriller, which, like E.T., was an unstoppable hit and would go on to become the highest grossing album of all time. Number 3. The movie may have been good, but the video game was awful. So considering E.T. was a hugely popular movie, there was naturally going to be a lot of E.T. merchandise, such as E.T. the figurines, E.T. the storybook, E.T. the shoes, E.T. the board game, E.T. the breakfast cereal, E.T. the plush toy, E.T. the jewelry, E.T. the oily Happy Meal posters, E.T. the very questionable looking finger, E.T. the book of fan mail which exists for some reason, and of course, E.T. the vitamin pills. However, one piece of E.T. merchandise that has almost become legend in its own right is E.T. the Atari game. A game that is widely considered so awful, people are still talking about it to this day. The game, which was very quickly put together for a Christmas release, sees gamers playing as E.T., where you wander around the forest, or at least I think it's meant to be a forest. This looks more like two Pac-Mans having a conversation, and this looks like a happy face, while looking for small parts in order to put together a special telephone for phoning home, while also avoiding being caught by scientists and some detective guy who looks like Dick Tracy. Oh yeah, and there are holes in this game. Lots and lots of holes. No matter what, while playing this game, your ass is going down. Seriously, so many holes. Okay, if falling down holes is your thing, then E.T. the Atari game is your holy grail. Look at Elliot on the cover. He looks so sad, probably because he knows he's in such a bad game. Either that or he's upset that he's wearing so much fake tan. Seriously, look at how orange Elliot is. E.T. the Atari game is often blamed for causing the gaming crash of 1983, and the E.T. video game sales were so bad, unsold copies were buried in the New Mexico desert. The irony is, in the public eye, E.T. the movie could do no wrong, whereas the game could do no good. However, over the years I have seen some gamers say that it wasn't that bad and that they enjoyed playing it, and still to this day it's one of the most talked about chapters in video game history. In fact, supposedly game designers had to get approval from Spielberg in order to release this game. So apparently even Steven Spielberg was A-okay with it. Number 2, the sequel evolved into another Spielberg production. Although Spielberg never intended for there to be an E.T. sequel, he was toying with the idea somewhat, where the draft of a sequel was put together, where a spaceship lands on Earth carrying a gang of aliens that are the same species as E.T., only these ones aren't kind and thoughtful like E.T., but instead are more mischievous and set loose and run amok. The aliens also have sharp teeth and daggers, and they get up to all kinds of no good like mutilating cattle and even interrogate poor little Elliot. However, the E.T. sequel didn't happen. Instead, in 1984, Gremlins came out. But instead of the monsters consisting of E.T.'s species of aliens, Gremlins was a new monster concept grown from another adorable creature called Mogwai. In fact, I always felt that the start of Gremlins had the same whimsical feel of E.T., what with the cute out-of-this-world creature finding itself in a suburban home, and the wonders that come from that. However, E.T.'s race would make a cinematic comeback when they were briefly seen in Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace, adding more mythology to the alien species. There was also a sequel book called The Book of the Green Planet, where E.T. returns home, where we find out that he is 1,000 years old, and that his species are the masters of gardening and growing life. E.T. observes Elliot while Elliot is growing through puberty, and is concerned that he has forgotten his kindness, where E.T. tries to send telepathic messages to Elliot, and Elliot also has a massive crush on a girl with pigtails, who I think is meant to be this girl, but I'm not too sure. Number 1, and the world went nuts for E.T. E.T. was released in May 1982 and was an instant hit and paved the rest of the way for cinema in the 1980s, creating a subculture of adventure and tales featuring cute aliens and/or creatures. It made an insane $792 million on a $10 million budget. It was in the number 1 spot at the box office for 6 weeks, and was doing a back and forth between the number 1 and number 2 spot all the way to October. In 1983, it became the highest grossing movie of all time, beating Star Wars, with critics instantly labeling it as Steven Spielberg's masterpiece. The movie would have re-showings all the way up to 1985, and even its VHS release was a big deal, with E.T.'s video release making $15 million alone. E.T. would go on to be nominated for 9 Academy Awards and won 4. It lost to Best Picture only to Gandhi. It also won 2 Golden Globes and 4 Saturn Awards. Clearly, E.T. fever had hit the masses and was here to stay. The movie had a re-release in 2002 to celebrate its 20th anniversary, with a cleaned up picture and updated special effects. Although I think the original is just fine the way it is, but unlike the Star Wars trilogy, the original version is at least still available. And no doubt in my mind there will be more celebrations to come for the movie's 40th anniversary in 2022, as the legacy keeps going. E.T. is a story that has been told long ago, but one that'll never end. The ultimate story of friendship. The story where 2 lost souls found each other, and through their powerful bond, they were both able to get home. I think we live in such turbulent times. Times of tragedy, conflict, misunderstanding, and disease. And for that reason, E.T. is a great movie to go back to, as it takes us back to the innocence of our youths. A kinder, gentler time, without all the complications that affect us in the real adult world. E.T. has great themes of acceptance and friendship, as well as understanding and communicating and working together. All of which are things that the world could probably do with right now. So even though E.T. is now nearly 40 years old, it is still more relevant than ever. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to phone home. See ya!